Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. Hello, and welcome back to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. Today's episode is going to be the second episode based on the book, The How of Happiness by Sonja Lynbomirsky, which I learned about when I was researching the episode on hedonic adaptation. The book extensively reviews what research has taught us about increasing happiness and outlines 12 types of activities that can boost happiness. For each month of 2025, I plan to have a podcast episode that will go over one of those types of activities. In January, the topic was expressing gratitude. For the month of February, the topic is cultivating optimism. For more information, I encourage you to check out the book, which is also available as an audiobook read by the author. These episodes are really to help you build true wealth, which is having the tools to live the life you want. These are mindset tools to increase happiness in your life, and most of us want more happiness in our life. So let's talk about cultivating optimism. We've all met people who are naturally optimistic, and when I think of people with an optimistic disposition, they really do seem to be happy people. We've also met people who are more pessimistic, or more like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. I personally think I was more optimistic when I was younger, especially when I think about my middle school and high school years. But then towards my later teenage years, I would say I turned a little bit more critical and would have called myself more realistic. There was a part of me that said that if I didn't have high expectations, I was less likely to also have disappointment. That didn't mean I didn't have high expectations for myself, but to not have high expectations of other people or other things or things coming up. Optimism is not necessarily about having high expectations, but more about thinking that good things are possible. It's not saying that bad things don't happen, but it's looking for what good comes along with the bad. Usually things are not all bad. It's a mix of good and bad. Looking at the bright side or finding that silver lining is optimism. It doesn't mean that you have to turn into a Pollyanna and act like everything is good. It's about noticing what's right rather than what's wrong. It doesn't mean we don't acknowledge what's wrong, but it means that we don't dwell on it. In fact, optimism is that we can look at what's wrong and we can also change what's wrong to be more right. Optimism is about feeling good about your future. It's about trusting that you can get through the tough situation or challenge. When you're having a bad day, it's knowing that you can make it through the day and that there will be better days ahead. There are a lot of similarities with cultivating optimism and cultivating gratitude, as they both involve looking at the positive side of the situation. Cultivating gratitude is more based on the past and present, whereas cultivating optimism is more focused on the future. Dr. Lynbomirsky talks about differentiating between little optimism and big optimism, with the difference involving how specific or small are one's positive experiences. She gives the example of, my flight tomorrow will arrive on time, as little optimism, whereas we are on the threshold of a glorious age, as big optimism. Little optimism helps people move forward in their everyday life, whereas big optimism may make you feel energetic, excited, or strong. Optimism can mean different things to different people, and even psychologists who study optimism have somewhat different definitions when it comes to optimism. There are some researchers that characterize optimism as an overall expectation about a positive future. This falls in line with the belief that one's goals can be accomplished. Others look at optimism as the way people tend to explain their outcomes and interpret circumstances. The example offered in the book is if a person who tried and failed to sell her car would be called optimistic if she attributed her failure to causes that were external, transient, and specific, like wintertime is a buyer's market, as opposed to causes that were internal, long-lasting, and pervasive, like I'm terrible at persuading people. There are other researchers who focus less on the target of optimism. The optimistic approach of I will get there but instead look at how we think we'll get there. When you're optimistic about the future, you're more confident about your ability to achieve your goals. This leads you to invest effort to reaching those goals, which then makes your goals more likely to be achieved. This line of thinking falls very much in line with the "she believed she could, so she did" quote by R.S. Gray, as well as the "if you think you can or can't, you're right" quote by Henry Ford. One study by Laura King that studied optimism asked participants to spend 20 minutes writing a narrative description of their best possible future selves every day for 4 consecutive days. Dr. King found that people who wrote about their visions relative to those who wrote about other topics were much more likely to show immediate increases in positive moods and to be happier several weeks later. This is an exercise that you could easily do yourself. You can modify the exercise by writing 1 day a week for the next month instead of 4 consecutive days. Varying the exercise will help keep it interesting, so you could change the prompt somewhat and write about your best possible future self in different aspects of your life. For example, you could spend 1 day writing about your best possible self in terms of your relationship with your spouse, another day about relationships with your children or your parents, another day writing about your work, and then maybe a 4th day writing about a creative pursuit you may have. You could think about writing what you would like your life to look like in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. Writing about your future self helps you see the bigger picture of your life and what's possible. It may also prompt you to think about what you need to do now in order to start making these things happen. It can encourage working on a best possible self today to make that future come true. Writing itself is structured and systematic. It prompts you to organize, integrate, and analyze your thoughts in a way that's different than if you're just daydreaming. Writing helps organize your thoughts and put it down in a coherent manner. Writing gives you an opportunity to learn about yourself. You may have a better understanding of your priorities, your emotions, and your motives. It has the added bonus that you can review it later, whether it's days, months, or years later. I'm a big fan of writing or journaling, and I've kept a journal since I was in middle school. Some days it's really interesting to go back and read about the past and see how my mind was working back then. Another variation on the best possible selves journaling is to keep a list of goals and sub-goals. Start with a goal you have in the future. Perhaps it's you want $1 million for retirement in 10 years. Then break down what you would need to do to actually make that happen. Steps might be maxing out your retirement account contributions, opening up a brokerage account, setting up automatic withdrawals from your paycheck to the brokerage account that automatically gets invested, rebalancing once a year, etc. But of course, there are different ways to reach a given goal, so choose the steps and mini goals that work for you. Someone else's steps may be start learning about real estate investing, check out some books, build up a team, purchase their first rental property, and continue along those lines. Both paths can get someone to the same goal. What path do you want to take? Another exercise involves identifying the automatic pessimistic thoughts or barrier thoughts you currently have. Then working on replacing those thoughts with ones that are more positive or favorable. An example in the book as a barrier thought is, quote, "Ever since my relationship ended, I feel unlovable and unappealing," end quote. It's a barrier thought since it serves as a barrier to optimism. When you identify these thoughts, write them down, then consider ways to reinterpret the situation. Dr. Lynbomirsky offers questions to ask yourself. What else could this situation or experience mean? Can anything good come from it? Does it present any opportunities? What lessons could be learned and applied for the future? Were there any strengths that you might have developed as a result? Of course, you'll want to avoid doing this exercise when you're feeling down or in a pessimistic mood. Practicing optimism is not about self-deception. I love the quote in the book that comes from Lee Ross. Quote, "The world can be a horrible, cruel place. And at the same time, it can be wonderful and abundant. These are both truths. There is no halfway point. There is only choosing which truth to put in your personal foreground." End quote. You can ask yourself, what's the upside of looking at the optimistic side? What's the downside? What situation would you prefer to find yourself? Being optimistic that things will go according to plan doesn't mean that you don't make contingency plans if things start to fall apart. After all, you can't make contingency plans for every scenario since you may not even think of every scenario that could happen. Optimism can also be about trusting that you will figure it out as well. Try cultivating some optimism in your everyday life this month and see how it impacts your overall happiness. If you want to hear more details on exercises or the research, check out the book, The How of Happiness by Sonja Lynbomirsky. I hope you're enjoying these episodes covering different exercises to increase overall happiness. I'd love to hear your response. You can always reach out to me by emailing me at growyourwealthymindset@gmail.com. Thank you so much for being a listener of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, and I'll be back next week with another episode. Have a great week. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.